For those of you who haven't met, I'm Jerry Halpin. I'm with the Historic Society, and I coordinate these Cotuit Chronicles lectures. And I really want to welcome you here tonight to our first kickoff of the summer season for 2023. And I'm really excited about the programs we put together. I hope you can join us all for our talks. It'll be through October, so it'll be July, August, September, and October, 4 more after tonight. Just as a little plug for the Historic Society, we are a membership organization and we survive on memberships and donations. So if you're not a member, there are membership applications and brochures in the back. If you are, thank you. If you would like to make a donation, there's a box in the back. As you know, we're doing our capital campaign and we have some good news and some maybe not so good news. The good news is our original campaign was for $450,000 and we have successfully raised $450,000, which has allowed us to start phase 1, which is the museum, working on that, adding archival room and staff rooms. The bad news is because of inflation and supply chain, $450,000 is not enough. So we are still trying to raise some money, and any money that we raise tonight will go to that. What we'll be working on is the Doddridge Homestead. We will be taking out, as I call it, the modern bathroom and putting it, there's going to be a bathroom now in the new addition, and we will be putting an old pantry which should have been there in the 1860s, not a bathroom that was from the 1950s. So anything you donate tonight will go towards that. Tonight I'm very pleased to have Dr. Daphne Palmer Geanacopoulos here. She'll be discussing her new book, The Pirate's Wife. It should be a very interesting subject. Daphne is a historian, journalist, and author. She's also the author of The Pirate Next Door, the untold story of the 18th century pirate wives, families, and communities, which actually included Cape Cod's own Maria Goody Hallett and the wife of Sam Bellamy, the notorious pirate. Daphne's writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Southern Living, Virginia Business, and other articles. For the last 15 years, Daphne has conducted extensive original research on pirates, their wives, in archives in London, Washington, New York, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. And she's dedicated her career to shining lights on the stories of forgotten women such as Sarah Kidd, who we'll hear about tonight. And from my background in genealogy, that I do a lot of research, colonial records of women are almost impossible to find. So I really want to hear what Daphne has found, how she's pieced the little fragments, because that's probably all you can ever get is little fragments together to get the story of Sarah Kidd. So without further ado, Daphne.
Thank you all for coming tonight, especially on a night where it's misting outside. Thank you, Jerry, for that lovely invitation. I'm delighted to be here at the Cotuit Library, and I'm honored to be the first speaker at the Cotuit Historical Society Summer Lecture Series. The Pirate's Wife is a book I've been working on for 5 years. It is the first ever direct account of the life of Sarah Kidd, the wife of the notorious pirate Captain William Kidd. Sarah lived a long and storied life, and I'm going to give you a glimpse into it. I hope you all will find that Sarah Kidd is easily as interesting and remarkable as her famous husband. Generations of readers the world over know the story of Captain William Kidd, the noble sea captain and privateer who turned ruthless pirate. The history of the Golden Age of Piracy, in which Kidd played an outsized part, is replete with the exploits of pirates of many stripes, who hoisted the black flag and prowled the seas. Oh. Not too dark.
Too dark?
It's a little dark, yeah. Thank you. Who prowled the seas, attacking 17th and 18th century merchant vessels bound for the West Indies, West Africa, and North America. Kidd's story is particularly striking. In 1699, Captain Kidd became the subject of a deadly political scandal that involved top officials on both sides of the Atlantic, including the King of England. There was a worldwide chase, an eventual conviction and execution at the hands of colonial officials who may have been complicit in Kidd's darkest acts of piracy. It was a drama laced with lies, secrets, double dealing, betrayal, and buried treasure. The story of his journey from privateer to murderous pirate has been immortalized across the centuries in print, on stage and screen, in video games, and even in an epic 22-verse ballad. But our understanding of his legend is incomplete. What is largely unknown is that Kidd had a partner and accomplice, a behind-the-scenes player who enabled his plundering and helped him outpace his enemies. This accomplice was his wife, the English-born Sarah Kidd, a young, well-to-do New York socialite whose extraordinary life is a lesson in reinvention and resourcefulness. Sarah was running a thriving New York merchant business in New York City when she met Captain Kidd. The encounter set off a high-octane romance that often operated outside the law. While Captain Kidd was plundering the high seas, Sarah Kidd was pirating in her own way, within the confines of polite society, working to ensure her husband never got caught and that the location of his buried treasure stayed secret. With bold determination to survive and protect her husband, Sarah secretly aided and abetted her husband, fighting alongside him against his accusers. The most impressive part is that even after Captain Kidd was put to death for his crimes, Sarah remained an incredibly beloved fixture of the community, securing a long and prosperous life for herself and her children. Sarah knew how to persuade, and she knew how to hustle. And in a time when women held little legal power, she found a way to ensure her future and protect her family. But for more than 300 years, the story of Sarah Kidd has been all but erased from history. My journey into the world of pirates began in 2002, when I was commissioned by the New York Times to write a freelance piece for their museum's special section about the Widow Pirate Museum in Provincetown, Cape Cod. The museum contains the artifacts from the Widow pirate ship that crashed during a fierce nor'easter off the coast of Wellfleet in 1717. Prior to writing this article, I didn't know much about pirates, except what I had read in books and seen in movies. I thought all pirates had a pet parrot, like Long John Silver in Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, or looked like the handsome and fit Errol Flynn in the 1935 movie Captain Blood, or more recently walked, talked, and wore eyeshadow, like Jack Sparrow in the movies Pirates of the Caribbean. Looking at the everyday artifacts recovered from the pirate ship, silver coins, cutlery, pewter plates, a teapot with the shoulder blade of a pirate, pistols, cannon, navigational instruments, medical supplies, and even a size 5 shoe, leg bone, and silk stocking, I realized that these mythological figures were mere ordinary men. The legend of the captain, Samuel Bellamy, and his love interest, Maria Hallett, told me that pirates had connections on land. They had families and community links that we don't know much about. As I was researching my dissertation turned previous book, The Pirate Next Door, the untold story of 18th century pirates' wives, families, and communities, I kept encountering evidence of this mysterious woman who seemed oddly on the periphery of the story of the notorious Captain Kidd. Even the influential and authoritative early source book on pirates, called A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates by Captain Charles Johnson, did not include Sarah in the lengthy chapter on Captain Kidd. Sarah was alive at the time that book was published in London in 1724, and it would have been possible for the author to interview her, or people who knew her. Finding Sarah's initials scratched on a colonial document at an archive in Boston started me on a thrilling journey to learn more about her. I would soon learn that her initials, SK, marked the spot where love and law divide. To research Sarah's story, I had to use a variety of sources because women left little record of their affairs. Most women, including Sarah, could not write. Men owned all the property and exercised most of the legal rights at the time. I read the contextual history of pirates and of the time period to learn the political, economic, and cultural events that shaped Sarah's life. I was able to find some important primary sources of Sarah's, such as her petition to regain her seized property from the governor of New York, Lord Belmont, and her last will and testament. Many of the ancient sources that I relied on were handwritten, and I transcribed over 250 of them to make them easier to work with. I visited archives in the places Sarah and Captain Kidd had been, including those in New York, Boston, and Rhode Island. I traced Sarah's steps in the surroundings she visited, especially in Manhattan, where she spent most of her life. I also found great resources in the Admiralty papers at the National Archives in London. I found a rich cache of letters that were in a sea chest in Captain Samuel Burgess's pirate ship when it was captured by a British privateer in 1699. The letters were in the pirate's mailbag and contained a few letters from Captain Kidd's crewmen aboard the Adventure Galley to their wives, and the wives to Kidd's crewmen. The letters are dated from 1695 to 1699, and they show that correspondence was conducted thousands of miles across the globe between Indian Ocean pirates and North American colonists, and that there was successful and direct communications between New York and Madagascar and back again. No letters from Sarah or Captain Kidd were among these, and none have survived, but there is every likelihood that they communicated during his 3-year voyage through the Mariner's Mail Service, which was located on Ascension Island, which is a remote outpost in the Atlantic. New York merchant captains trading with the pirates in Madagascar stopped for fresh supplies of turtle meat and dropped off and collected the mail that was left under a rock with a hole in it by the harbor. A letter from the wife of Kidd's crewman, Jacob Horn, was especially helpful and informative. Writing from their home in Flushing, New York, on June 5th, 1698, Sarah Horn told her husband, quote, "We hear abundance of flying news about you." This meant word had spread from port to port and ship to ship, and that there was trouble aboard the Avenger Galley. That trouble, we would later learn, was murder, mutiny, and piracy. To further understand the maritime world in which Captain Kidd was a part of, I attended a workshop at the National Archives in London and conducted research with scholars from the Prize Papers Project, which is a collaborative effort of the National Archives with the University of Oldenburg in Germany, to research and categorize the thousands of yet unopened documents captured by the British in wartime in the 17th and 18th century. I examined trial records, depositions, personal correspondence, ship's logs, cargo inventories, and even a mariner's personal journal that was worn from wear in his front pocket. The manuscript room at the Library of Congress was a terrific resource. and Captain Kidd's own recorded statements gave strong evidence of his devotion to Sarah. Archivists and other historians I met were enthusiastic and helpful during my research, as was my trusty research assistant Higgins, a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named for a runaway pirate, Jeremiah Higgins. Here he is inspecting the galleys of the pirate's wife. Unfortunately, there are no contemporary paintings of Sarah Kidd. She can't be seen that way. But in 1911, the artist Jean-Léon Jerome Fer created this painting of Captain Kidd in New York Harbor. The attractive, beautifully dressed woman with a lace fan holding Captain Kidd's hand on the deck of his ship is an interesting rendition of a woman who has captured Captain Kidd's attention. One contemporary of Sarah's described her as lovely and accomplished, and the woman in this painting is certainly lovely. Kidd's velvet knee-length coat, a sword at his side, and a tri-cornered hat are historically accurate depictions of the attire of the period and what he would have worn as a successful sea captain. His gesture towards his lovely visitor, a suave, gentlemanly bow and a warm clasp of her hand, fits with the charming demeanor he was known to display. While this painting is a figment of the artist's imagination, and in 1911 we did not know the story of Captain Kidd and Sarah, there is coincidentally some historical semblance of truth in it. Born Sarah Bradley around 1670, the future pirate's wife arrived in New York from England with her widowed father and 2 brothers when she was 14 years old. At 15, she was married to one of the richest men in the colony, a much older, wealthy New York merchant named William Cox. When Cox died tragically 4 years later, in 1689, Sarah married a Dutch merchant and mariner named John Ort. It was then when she met Captain William Kidd, a well-respected gentleman with whom she began a friendship. Captain Kidd was Sarah's 3rd husband. Sarah was a twice-widowed 21-year-old, considered one of the most eligible and sought-after women in New York, when she and Kidd married just 2 days after her 2nd husband's death. While the circumstances might appear suspect for Sarah and Kidd to marry so soon after her 2nd husband's untimely demise, Kidd and Sarah were stellar members of New York society. They were New York's power couple. No untoward behavior was ever proved. At the time of their marriage, the well-built, well-dressed 37-year-old sea captain, who spoke with a hint of a Scottish accent, was one of the most respected men in Manhattan. He was a celebrated war hero and sought-after privateer. A privateer was hired by the government to legally plunder and seize enemy ships. He was a legal pirate. During wartime, the resources of warring countries were stretched to the limit, and privateers were extra hired hands who owned their own armed vessel and served as an auxiliary to England's navy. A privateer's assignment was detailed in a document called a letter of marque and reprisal. He had investors, and the captured prizes and cargo was shared with them. The captain and crew received a smaller proportion of the take. There was sometimes a fine line between a legal privateer and an outlaw pirate. Many a privateer, once out at sea and beyond the reaches of the authorities, turned pirate to avoid having to share the loot. There were other reasons. Turning pirate was an attractive alternative for some men, especially with those with wives and families, because pirates lived in a highly civilized, democratic society. They were paid well when the going was good, and they were treated fairly. Pirates lived by a set of rules called articles, and each pirate had to sign his name, or if he could not write, leave his mark as an X to join the crew of a pirate ship. With that commitment to be true to his fellow brethren of the coast, as they were called, came benefits. Each pirate had an equal vote, and most were given an equal share of the booty. There was a form of health insurance, life insurance, and retirement benefits. The pirate community was designed to support and maintain their relationships on land while they were at sea. For example, if a pirate died in action, his share of the booty was smuggled halfway around the world and given to his family. Turning pirate was a risky and dangerous choice, but for some men, a merry life and a short one was their motto. Sarah and Kid's wedding took place in Manhattan on a rainy Saturday, May 16, 1691. It was a day of high drama and grisly 17th century justice. England was at war with France. Pirates were plundering the high seas, and two traitors, the self-appointed Governor Jacob Leicester and his son-in-law Jacob Milborne, were hanged for treason against King William and Queen Mary in the public square. Sarah and Kid attended the hanging after their wedding. A public hanging was an event everyone turned out for. It was a carnival-like source of entertainment. The stark contrast of the day, a love match and an execution, foreshadowed the dark drama that would be their life together. The Kids lived in a mansion Sarah inherited from her first husband, located on the corner of Pearl and Hanover Street in the Hanover Square neighborhood of Manhattan. The waterfront property faced a wall, now called Wall Street, in the financial district. Coincidentally, their home was just a few blocks from the offices of my publisher, Hanover Square Press, an imprint of HarperCollins. I like to think Sarah found my publisher for me. Around 1692, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, and in 1694 she had another daughter, little Sarah. During the colonial period, giving birth was a social and bonding event where women looked after one another. Sarah's babies would have been born at home in a separate area away from the main living quarters. Men were not involved in the birthing process, so Captain Kidd would have been busy elsewhere. It was the job of women, relatives, neighbors, friends, and elders in the colony to act as midwives to assist in the delivery. Special birthing linens were prepared and laid out. Sarah would have used a birthing stool, or perhaps a loved one held her upright and supported her as she progressed through labor. In the early stages, Sarah would have acted as the hostess of the festive occasion. It was an old English tradition for new mothers to serve groaning cakes, a sweet, nutritious baked good made of spices, molasses, rums, apples, and carrots. And to go with it, groaning beer. As they waited for the blessed moment, the women would entertain themselves with gossip, jokes, and stories. In 1696, Captain Kidd was given a dream job, 2 privateering commissions from the King, William III. His investors were some of the most important men in England, including the newly appointed governor of New York and Massachusetts, Richard Cotuit, known as Lord Belmont. Belmont's complicated relationship with Kidd would lead to Kidd's tragic downfall. In his brand new ship, one that looked like this, the Adventure Galley was a 287-ton warship with 3 tall masts, square rig sails, and 34 big guns. It was a hybrid ship called a galley, meaning that it could be rowed as well as sailed. His job was to hunt French enemy ships and to rid the sea of pirates who disrupted international trade. His commissions were for 1 year. His initially unsuccessful voyage led to frustration, mutiny, and eventually Kidd's turn to piracy. Sarah was key to Kidd's fight for his life against the men who accused him of turning from privateer to pirate. She and their daughter spent time with Kidd on his pirate ship, and Sarah helped Kidd hide his stolen treasure. As an accomplice to an outlaw, she was arrested and imprisoned with him in Boston. Once released, Sarah helped construct the narrative Captain Kidd presented in his defense. She ensured he was taken care of in jail. She worked tirelessly to help secure a pardon, and she even tried to help plot an escape. After Kidd was executed in 1701, Sarah Kidd lived another 40 years. She reinvented herself, and she managed to go from one half of a criminal outlaw couple to a high society socialite. She secured her family's inheritance, remarried, had more children, and lived the rest of her life as a prominent and respectable citizen. She even learned how to write her full name. Sarah Kidd's extraordinary life is a rare example of the kind of life that pirates' wives lived during the Golden Age of Piracy. Hers is a tale about love, marriage, motherhood, and survival. Sarah's life, and particularly her transformation from a New York socialite to a stateless outlaw, sheds new light on the political, economic, and cultural events of the late 17th and 18th centuries. From her, we learn about the economic hardships of widowhood, the political repercussions of piracy, the effects of war on the new and emerging colonial economies, the business of slavery. Her life tells a broader story about how certain women were able to assert their will and reclaim their agency within the oppressive strictures of colonial America. During her 74 years, Sarah lived through 7 British monarchs, 21 New York governors, and she experienced firsthand the Golden Age of Piracy. She survived 4 husbands and 3 of her 5 adult children. The Pirate's Wife, the remarkable true story of Sarah Kidd, recasts the image of Sarah, of Kidd, from a diabolical pirate to a flawed but decent man who tried to please his investors and protect his wife and family. He was a pirate, but not one with a black heart. Sarah's initials, SK, scratched on a few colonial documents, gave clues to her existence. Those bold pen strokes reveal a history we have only imagined. The dangerous, difficult, and thrilling life of a pirate's wife. They shed unexpected light on a young colonial woman caught up in a world of politics, passion, and grisly 18th century justice. The unknown SK is finally identified. She is Sarah Kidd, the First Lady of Pirates. I'm happy to answer any questions as long as they're not too hard. Yes.
Were you able to track any of her descendants, the 2 girls? They have living relatives?
I did not find any. The only trace that I was found is that Sarah Kidd was a member of Trinity Church Wall Street, and her descendants continued to use the pew that Captain Kidd rented for them into 1800, and she died in 1744. But what happened to the daughters, I don't know, or the 3 sons. I do know where the son is one of the sons and grandson is buried. Yes,
Did she ever accompany her husband on any of his voyages?
no,
Was any treasure ever found?
yes, it was found. Captain Kidd buried it on Gardiner's Island, which is in Long Island Sound. And Lord Belmont found out about it and sent somebody to dig it up. And so it was returned to Boston, and the treasure was sent with Kidd to London to be turned over to the Crown. And it was used to help build Greenwich Hospital. Yes.
How did she reinvent herself?
Well,
Was it through the next marriage or?
yes, changed her name and her new identity, started a new life, had more children, and it was all behind her.
So was she a good woman or a con woman?
I think she was very brave and strong. I think the lesson of Sarah Kidd is her tenacious resilience. She never gave up 4 husbands. I mean, starting at the age of 15, to be widowed that many times. She came from England without a mother, just her father and 2 brothers, and she endured this horrendous life of challenges and just kept going forward. Many women in that time would not have been able to endure the way she did. And she was very, very religious. She was Anglican and attended, as I said, Trinity Church, Wall Street in Manhattan, and it was her religion, I believe, that grounded her. It's very evident in her will, where her will is very religious, full of prayers, and she admonishes her children in a very strong way to be happy with what she is leaving them, and no fighting among you, and she's just a very, she had a very strong core.
Did she leave a significant estate?
She did leave a bit of a good amount of property. The actual dollar amount we don't know because the inventory was not in the records. But her will lists properties and rental properties. So after after Captain Kidd was executed, she lost everything. They took her house, they took all her assets, and she was homeless and destitute. And it was Queen Anne, actually, who restored her to her position in society and restored all her wealth to her. Yes.
What about Hannah,
Who?
her sister?
Her sister?
Yeah, Hannah Screecher. They got a road right up the street, the Screecher Way.
Oh, is that Sarah Kidd's sister?
Yes.
Oh.
And they buried the bodies, but I think they killed everybody right here at the Kettle Hole, whenever the Kettle Hole is being back there. My just theory, I guess.
I didn't know that she had a sister. I knew she had 2 brothers. But I'm happy to learn something new. Anything else?
I was late, so you may have mentioned it, but what inspired you to take a deep dive into Sarah Kidd's account?
Well, it was when I was commissioned by the New York Times that I first got interested in pirates, because as I didn't know anything about them, and when I wrote the article for the Times about the Widow Pirate Museum, when I saw the artifacts, it seemed like these were really, these mythological figures were just human beings. These were just men. And it made me realize that these men had mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, friends, cousins, and I wanted to know who they were. So my first book, The Pirate Next Door, it has 4 chapters on 4 New England pirate captains and their families. And it was writing that book that I discovered Sarah Kidd. And I discovered Sarah Kidd at an archive in Boston, the Massachusetts State Archives. And I didn't expect to find her. I was looking for documents for Captain Kidd, and there was a document there that had her signature on it, the SK that I showed you. And that was more than thrilling to just see that and touch the paper. It was amazing. Thank you. Yes.
How many documents did you find with her initials on it? And what type of documents were they?
So she signed 6 petitions with her initials SK. Her will, she signed her full name, which was Sarah Rousby. That was her 4th husband. There were earlier documents that had to do with real estate transactions. So I would say original primary sources that Sarah actually signed was probably a dozen. Which is good for that time period. Yes.
You mentioned some pirates' letters that had never been opened. Did you find that a lot of the documents you looked at, you were the first one touching them?
For some of them, yes. When I was in London and I went to the Prize Papers Project workshop, there are over 160,000 letters that have never been opened, and they needed help from someone like me to help go through them, and so I was opening these letters for the first time. It was really amazing. Yes.
So those letters were never delivered?
Right, they were, that's right. The mail bag was captured, and how it worked was when a ship was captured, the privateer would go in and take everything on the ship, all the crew, all the cargo, and the mail bag. And the mail bag was then taken to London, as was the ship and the crew and the cargo, and the mail was put in the Admiralty papers. And that's where they have stayed, many of them, until now. But it's great that they saved them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how did you learn to read the writing and understand what it says?
So that handsome man back there with the glasses, raise your hand, that's my husband. No, that's my husband. When he saw that I had 250 documents to transcribe, and I was doing it on a little computer like this, he bought me a big monitor. And I just had to learn that 2 F's mean S, and there's just different punctuation and things like that, and I just taught myself. And it took me 5 months to transcribe 250 documents.
That's good.
Yeah, that was, he was slow going, but really well worth it. Then you really know what they're saying. Yes.
How long was Ascension Island used as like a mail post?
How long was it used?
For a mail, for correspondence going back and forth between Indian Ocean and the States and this kind of thing.
You mean, was it 16th, 17th, 18th century?
Yeah, I never
How
heard
long
this
was it
story
used
before
as a
about
post?
like Ascension Island was when people would drop off letters and exchange letters and use it as a mail drop.
It was certainly used in the 17th and the 18th century. For merchant sea captains did it, and pirate captains did too. And it was, pretty low tech. You go to the rock with the harbor, with the hole in it by the harbor, and pick up the letters and put them in your mail bag. But they stopped there also because it was kind of a halfway point, and there was a rich supply of fresh turtles there. And they would take the turtles and put them on board ship and turn them on their backs, and they would be stunned but alive. And then when they were ready to eat them, they'd flip them over and cook them. And it was a very rich and popular source of food. Yes.
Who managed the Ascension Island deal? Who managed it? Who provided the people who worked there when the mail dropped? Was it the government who owned the Ascension Island?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know, but
Was
it's
it,
been
you
in
don't know
existence.
who owned it? Do you know who owned it?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a great question. Yes.
I know a little bit about that Ascension Island mail drop from a book I was reading. Up until about 10 years ago, the mail was still being delivered and routed from and to there, and also St. Helena, which you recall is where Napoleon lived the rest of his life. It was just south of Ascension Island, in the middle of the Atlantic. The British Royal Mail was running a ship up until about 10 years ago, back and forth between St. Helena and Ascension Island, delivering and receiving mail back and forth. And it was actually, they converted it into a cruise ship. You could actually take a trip on that from South Africa, that's where it originated, to Ascension Island and then fly to London. It was kind of a cool experience, but they stopped doing that about 10 years ago because they built an airport on St. Helena. So now you can fly in and out of St. Helena, and the mail is much more efficiently transported that way. So up until about 10 years ago.
The mail service was so low tech and so random that the correspondent would write 2 letters and send one on a different ship in the hopes, with fingers crossed, that it would get there. And amazingly so, it did, because some of those letters that were in the pirate's mailbag that I read you the one from Sarah Horn. There was another wife of Captain Kidd's crew member, who admonished her husband and said, "I've written you 2 and you've only written me 1. So it did work. Yes.
It didn't cost any money then to send it. To who? There were no stamps, were there?
Right. There were no envelopes either. They just folded them and stamped it with a wax seal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was no bias, so if somebody picked it up and said, "Oh, this is from a pirate ship,"
They didn't necessarily know. Like the
Yeah.
the letter from Sarah Horn.
yeah,
The other side of it says to Jacob Horn on the Adventure Galley,
yeah,
which started out as a privateer ship, and only later did it turn pirate. So there was no don't touch those. Don't touch
Yeah.
those. Good question though.
Anything else? Couple things to close. First, thank you very much, Daphne. I really enjoyed this. The other thing is Daphne has brought books with her, and we'll set this table up over here in a second, and she'll be signing them, and selling them and signing them. So if anyone would like a copy of the book, she'll be here to do that afterwards. And I'd like to remind you that next month our talk is going to be on Thursday, July 13th, which is the second Thursday, not the third Thursday. We moved it up a week because on the third Saturday is our Taste, our annual fundraiser at the Cotuit Historic Society grounds. We have twice as many vendors this year for food and things because we got the message last year it really wasn't enough, and so we've doubled it, and it should be an exciting evening. So really encourage you. Our tickets are on sale now, so go and get your tickets because they are, unfortunately, because of our size of our grounds, limited. So, but remember, so next month, it's the second Thursday, July 13th, and we'll have Anthony Sammarco coming to talk about S.S. Pierce, the Boston tradition. So give us a second, we'll get the table set up, and Daphne will sign some books and for you. Is there any other question before we? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. This was a great crowd for us.